Okay, I see the time is incrementing and the red light is flashing. So, should be working. Yeah, any particular questions or any particular like topics that you want to review? You don't have to have a question. You could just say like, could we go over such and such?
I think for me, especially after doing like the lab, like item-based construction versus word combination versus
that's when you need a little more.
I feel like I need more, just anything. It's just more time, maybe more examples. More examples.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That was good. Yeah. Okay. So this display is still turning on, but it might actually be good to do it without the slides anyway, because I feel like when I pull the slides up, then you see the same examples that I showed you before.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, hey, Mario. So we just had a question about the 3 types of multi-word utterances for young children, and so word combinations are does anyone remember, are they like the earliest stage, the latest stage? Earliest, yeah.
And it's like 2 words that maybe like hold kind of equal weight, like that are both related to.
Yeah, yeah. So they're not like that different from the one word, like from just taking 2 one-word utterances and kind of throwing them together. Mm-hmm. What differentiates them from that? Does anyone remember, like how you can tell the difference from a child who says like try to think of other examples than the ones I gave in class. Like a child who's describing like a fish swimming might say like swim fish. So in the one-word stage, what would that sound like if the child said that?
Swim fish could be really sneaky too, because you could do like swim dog or like swim whatever.
Yeah, but we're assuming the child's not doing it that way.
Okay.
So so let's just take this sentence. Is this in a grammatical order, word order? Mm-hmm. No. If you try to turn this into a grammatical sentence, like in a recast, if a parent reformulated or recast this, what would that be? The fish is swimming. Yeah. So it's kind of in the reverse order. And the point I was trying to make, about the one-word versus 2-word utterances, if this were in the one-word stage, it might be the same sequence of words, but it would be like swim, fish. Oh, there's yeah, the intonation would have a phrase boundary here, and there'd be more of a, like you could imagine there's like periods after each one, and there's more of a break.
And with the word combination, it's like, no.
Yeah, in word combination,
period comes after the last word.
Yeah, in word combination, it has to be like clearly a single phrase.
Yeah.
So there isn't as much of a break. Okay. Swim fish, swim fish. So the child might say swim fish, right?
That actually helps a lot.
Yeah. So it's not that different from the one-word stage, except that these two words are becoming prosodically grouped.
Right.
So they're in one phrase now.
I think my question is, if it's the other way, if the child say fish swim, is it still a word combination?
So it can just get ambiguous.
Yeah, that's where the
Yeah.
ambiguity is.
Yes, so it can get really ambiguous. You may not be able to tell, but a child is probably kind of in the word combination stage or in the item-based construction stage, so you might be able to tell from more like broader context of like looking at more of their utterances. Because they may, like if they say fish swim, and then they say he happy, something like that, then now you see like, oh, they're using pronouns, like, you know, the adjective is after the pronoun phrase.
Context.
Yeah, so you might be able to tell from context.
Okay.
Yeah, but if they say like fish swim, and then like I don't know, eat doggy. That's meaning like the child's trying to refer to the dog who is eating, but is getting the word already backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of that eat grandma punctuation saves lives jokes. So, yeah, so in this case, like, yeah, the child kind of happened to get fish swim in the right order.
Right.
But then they said eat doggy in the wrong order.
Gotcha.
Yeah. The other thing is, like, if there's a less ambiguous case of an item-based construction would be if there's, does anyone remember what other feature they can have?
The correct, probably. Morphemes.
Grammatical morphemes, yeah.
Morphemes.
So, or any kind of like grammatical words, like, so like the auxiliary verb is, if they get that, then that's clearly fishes swim. Even if it's fishes swim, it's still like in the right, like definitely in the right order. And then if they say fish swimming or fish is swimming, then that's also clearly, if it's got any like inflectional morphemes, adding that grammatical information to the word, then it's definitely item-based construction, yeah. So on the exam, so if I give you examples and ask you to evaluate them, I'll try to make them less ambiguous. So I'll try to, like if it is an item-based construction, I'll try to include those grammatical morphemes. If it's a word combination, it won't have those. And if it's an item-based construction, I'll try to put it in the correct word order. And a word combination would probably be I'd be more likely to put it in the wrong order, you know.
Right.
But if I ask you to provide examples, this is where, I remember in class when I was saying, like, if I ask you to provide examples of anything, try to check and keep them really clear and pick good examples.
Yeah.
So, so if I ask you, give me an example of a word combination, swim fish would be a good example because it's in the wrong order, and there's no inflectional morphemes. If I say, give me an example of an item-based construction, something like fish swimming would be a good example because now it's in the right order and it's got that inflectional morpheme. So just, even though an item-based construction doesn't have to have those grammatical aspects, it could be just a sentence that's in the right order. It's best to put them in your examples so that I can tell, you know what the features of that stage are. Yeah. So does anyone have any questions about what I mean by like try to give clear examples on the exam? Okay. So then the last type is, so we've talked about word combinations and item-based constructions. What's the last? Pivot schemas, yeah. Okay, I'm actually going to go over here. Yeah, so pivot schemas, the trick with these is that you have to see more than one utterance, or more than one sentence of the child's to know if they're using a pivot schema.
Yeah.
So you could see something that looks like, maybe it could be like exactly what Mary was saying, like you were saying with like fish swim, like, you could say like fish swim, dolphin swim, and then maybe it would be a pivot schema, but you have to see more than one to know that that's what the child's doing. Because a schema is like a strategy almost that the child's using to construct these two-word utterances. And by just kind of using the same construction every time and like fitting different nouns into that slot. So what are some examples? Can anyone remember some examples of a pivot schema?
More apple.
Yeah.
More whatever.
Right.
Is usually.
Yeah. Yeah, so here, more apple, more pear. And my daughters use mas in the exact same way, the Spanish word for more, but then she would mix it with English words. So mas apple, mas pear, etc. And then mas agua was her one like totally Spanish phrase. Okay, so what hi and bye were the other ones, yeah. So for this one, it would be more typically people who would be in that slot, except that my daughter was funny, and she said things like, hi, heck a gun. So she would use it for like new concepts. But typically, hi mommy, hi daddy.
feel like my brother said hi to cars. Hi, car.
Yeah, so that's another one. Yeah, another one. Well, actually, cars are interesting because a lot of kids think they're alive.
My daughter hugs our car.
Yeah, because they move. Yeah, a lot of kids think they're alive. Yeah, animacy. So this is, there's a term called animacy for if something's alive or not. That's what it means. And children have like a developing understanding of animacy, and they tend to think that if things move, they're alive. So, yeah, it's really interesting.
Big hug.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My daughter wants to touch all the cars, and I'm like, okay, gross. And also, you might set off an alarm, or somebody might get mad. Okay. So any other questions about these three: word combinations, pivot schemas, and item-based instructions? Yeah, Mario.
I'm just going to go over it again, like the differences between all three. Yeah, I'm still kind of a little shaky.
Yeah. So I would say that word combinations are the earliest one. So that when a child is first getting into combining words, so let's say like at 18 months, then the first thing they do is, so before this point, they've just been saying a word at a time. So they've been saying swim, fish, happy, right? And then once they, at the very beginning, when they start taking those two words and those individual words and combining them into multi-word phrases, they just take those individual words and just like try to stick them together. So there's no rhyme or reason to, like, I mean, they'll have something in common in terms of this, like the message, the semantics, like the meaning that the child wants to describe, but there's no systematic word order. Nothing really grammatical about how they're putting those words together. They just basically were saying swim fish, and now they say swim fish. Like now they're putting it together.
They're starting to try to put sentences.
Try to make sentences, exactly. But it's only two words at a time, and it's not in any syntax. There's no, they don't understand syntax yet, or they can't produce it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So 2 words at a time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, even though they're putting two words together here, there isn't really syntax in the sense that it's not structured in any systematic way. It's totally random which word comes first. Yeah. So then I would say, I mean, I don't know as much about the order of these things, but I like to think of item-based constructions as the most sophisticated. So I'd say that pivot schemas are probably the next thing they'll do. And that's, they might be getting a little closer to like grammatical word order here, but they're doing it by using the schema. So, so in this case, they're still pretty limited in like how many types of phrases they can do. So they're using these like individual schema to just like construct these sentences around the same word every time. So in this one, like if you think about like so if we can relate pivot schemas to communicative intents, because like what would be the communicative intent of asking for more of something?
To be given more to eat or whatever.
Yeah, it's a request for an object. Yeah, and then what
these
would,
examples, I guess.
What would be the communicative intent of a hi or bye? Yeah, social greeting. Yeah. So the child's using these schemas because they want to express that communicative intent a lot, right? So like my daughter was really focused on the social ones, and then like all toddlers, she was also really focused on getting food, getting objects. So she used mas a lot. I felt like mas was like half of the words she said, actually. It made it way easier at the time for me to speak to her in Spanish, actually, because even though she only really said 2 Spanish words, mas and agua, it was like, mas was like so much of what she said. So, yeah, so like if she's saying like, mas batis, like more crackers, or like mas apple, mas agua, then she's using this like the same pattern every time to get her needs met. So that's her goal, is to like get a need met, get more food.
So pivot schema deals with more like repeating the first word utterance, so like more. is what-
Yeah, it's not always necessarily the first word, but like we saw an example of silly, so it was like daddy silly, mommy silly.
So as long as
so
it's
yeah.
like one word repeating.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty often.
And then it's almost always a noun that fills the slot. So, yeah, so like, even in daddy, mommy, uncle,
Chuck.
silly.
Uncle Paul's silly.
Yeah, or Uncle
Uncle
Paul's
Chuck
silly.
is funny.
Oh, okay, whoops, yeah. So that might be another schema, right?
Yeah.
Uncle Chuck silly,
What's the
or Uncle
difference
Chuck
between-
funny. Yeah.
What's the difference between Paul and Chuck?
The critical difference between those uncles, yeah. So yeah, so in this example, like, silly is an adjective, so it goes after the noun. But it's repeating over and over, like, daddy silly, mommy silly, Uncle Paul silly, or Uncle Chuck funny, daddy funny, mommy funny, etc. So if it's a greeting, it's going to be before the noun. If it's an adjective, it's going to be after, and these quantity words go before. So that's going to dictate like which word comes first. But it's more like the things that show that it's a pivot schema are like it's repeating. So that, like you said, that one word keeps repeating, like more, mas, hi, bye, silly, funny, and then another word, a noun is filling that slot, and it's a different noun every time. So that's a sign that they can be a little more creative with their sentences. It's like creative and not creative at the same time, because by using the schema, they can fit like any new noun into that slot, and so they can create like infinite sentences, but they all have the same structure and they all have like roughly the same communicative intent and the meaning. So, I mean, you couldn't get very far as an adult if all you could say was like that people were silly or people were funny, right? But for a child, it's a good way for them to really expand what they're able to say with just two words in this early stage when they're not very sophisticated yet.
And like around what age does this usually happen?
Well, so children should be starting to combine words sometime around like 18 months, and if they're not combining words by 24 months, then that's a red flag. And when children are going to do these different stages, just kind of varies. So I would just think of it as like they should be combining. They should be putting two words together definitely by 24 months, so by the second birthday, and then once they start to do that, then they'll go through these stages.
Oh, okay.
So it could vary. Like some children will start combining words at like 16 months or 18 months, and others will start combining words at 24 months. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then once they start that, that's how a lot of our patterns are that we've been talking about in class. Like the most consistent thing is the stages, and like however every child whose language is developing typically will go through these stages in roughly the same order, but the timing just can vary. So yeah. And then the last one, the item-based construction. Now I've forgotten what Mario, what your original question was.
It was just kind of just like explaining each one.
Yeah.
Just like explaining each one.
Yeah, so, and like how you would, what it means. And so the item-based construction basically means that the child is learning syntax now and is using it more flexibly than in the pivot schema, where in the pivot schema the words do have a consistent order. But the child's relying on particular sequences. In item-based construction, the child is getting more flexible and combining more words together and much more opened, sort of like opened up in terms of like what they can express and how many different words they can combine together.
So like if Uncle Chuck funny was to become like item-based, it would be like Uncle Chuck is funny.
Yeah.
They would add that and it would become like grammatical.
Yeah, or even Uncle Chuck's funny.
Uncle Chuck's
with
funny.
A contraction.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's clicking.
That's a question that I have. I'm not totally sure. I've been meaning to look that up because I know that they're not required to have the grammatical morphemes, but I don't know if that's because like some sentences don't require them. Or if it's because like even if they omit them, it's still considered an item-based construction. So that's something I've been meaning to look more into to clarify my own understanding. And I mean, as with all the stages we talk about, there also isn't always a clear dividing line. So children might still be producing some pivot schemas when they start to use grammatical morphemes and more flexible syntax. And they might be doing some word combinations and some pivot schemas, so they bleed together. Yeah. But again, if I give you an example on the exam, or if I ask you to produce one, it's safest to give an example that has grammatical word order and has those grammatical morphemes. But there are definitely examples of item-based constructions that don't have them. So like a fish happy, let's assume it's not a pivot schema for this particular child, so they're not saying that over and over and over and putting other nouns into that slot. They've just spontaneously generated this sentence. This one, I mean, they're missing some function words or grammatical words like the fish, is happy. This one is called a copula, not an auxiliary verb. We haven't really talked about that in class, but has that been on your homeworks yet? I forget which homework it's on. It might be on homework 5.
Has it?
Okay, yeah, so don't worry about that for now.
But this one is like an adjective, and it's putting the verb in. Is it copula?
Yeah, so it's a copula because there's no main verb in the sentence, so happy is an adjective. Whereas in is swimming is the main verb, and so it can't be the main verb. So copula is a word for when the verb to be is functioning as the main verb. Here it's the auxiliary because there is another main verb. Yeah, but you don't have to worry about that for this exam. But anyway, so you could make the sentence even more grammatical, right, by having like the fish is happy. But if the child says fish happy, they're not omitting any like inflectional morphemes. So you don't see those grammatical morphemes, but it still would be an item-based construction because the words are in the right order. Yeah. But those examples are just a little more ambiguous. Like a fish happy example would be really ambiguous between like, is it a pivot schema? Is it a word combination? Is it an item-based construction? Right, exactly. So you just need so much more context from the child's speech to tell. And that's why for an exam, we want just like clear-cut examples as much as possible.
All right, let's watch this video that's like 10, 15 minutes long so you can get like context.
Yeah.
It's about context.
Yeah. All right, so Mario, did that help?
Yeah, that helped a lot.
Great.
Now,
Awesome.
I feel way better.
Good, yeah.
Ditto.
Okay, so what, any other topics from that lab that you need clarification on? Or Mary wanted to
Those were the
know?
basics.
Do we have to know like all, like, is there going to be a part on the test where we have to code stuff and like know all the intent?
I don't remember offhand so some exams